From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. I'm Paul Gigot with my esteemed colleagues, Kyle Peterson and Kim Strassel. Let's listen to Senator Rick Scott, who is the Florida senator and head of the Republican Senatorial Campaign Committee, talk about the bill on Sunday.
Right now, this bill actually ought to be called the War on Seniors Act. I mean, this is a war on Medicare. You look at this. This is a $280 billion cut in Medicare. It's $280 billion that would have been spent. It was anticipated to be spent. It's not going to be spent now. And the drug companies that would be doing more research are not going to be able to spend the money on research. There will be life-saving drugs that seniors will not get. On top of that, I mean, they're going to raise taxes by over $700 billion. And let's remember, companies don't end up paying the taxes. Shareholders paying the taxes, lower income for the employees pay the taxes, less investment pays the taxes. So this $700 billion is actually going to hurt the economy.
Kim, I'm a bit puzzled by Senator Scott's attack on Medicare line in the sense that this is the element on Medicare in the bill is drug price controls that Medicare will be able to enforce on drug companies for a certain number of drugs that they sell to seniors as part of Medicare. But it's really not an attack on Medicare per se. It certainly is an attack on cures and drug innovation, but I guess they must have tested that Medicare line. I don't know if it's going to fly.
Yeah, well, they probably remember how successful Democrats were about a decade ago of suggesting Republicans were trying to push Granny off the cliff. I think the more appropriate way to say this is it isn't necessarily a cut to Medicare, but rather this is drug price controls that will siphon dollars away from drug makers by imposing caps on what they can charge for life-saving medicines. And when you siphon those dollars away, it's less money for research and development. It's fewer drugs coming down the pipeline. And that is a notable attack on seniors in that seniors are the people in the country that most benefit from new drug innovation and also from ongoing cures that we have out there. So, I mean, he's correct in that way, is that this was Democrats wanting to impose those price controls and caps so that they could use the money and the spending on things like their clean energy agenda. And I think that would have been a better way to put it. Now, they did get a little bit crosswise in here because in the end, the Senate parliamentarian ruled that a similar attempt to control prices in the commercial market with a rebate mechanism did not qualify to be used under these special reconciliation rules. And given that you cannot separate Medicare from the private market, what is now likely to happen is that as these drug price controls go into effect on drugs within the Medicare program, commercial drug makers will simply raise the costs that insurers pay for drugs in private plans. And so they're not likely to see any of that, quote, inflation reduction. Not that we've had a great deal of trouble with drugs becoming more costly because of inflation in recent years in any event.
This will raise the cost of private health plans because the drug makers, there's no question that they will do what a lot of physicians and hospitals already do, which is cost shift. So when you have price controls in Medicare and Medicaid, as you do in hospitals and doctors' services, you make up for it by charging more to private plans. And that's what's happened across healthcare more broadly, and that will now happen in drugs as well. So thank you, senators, for that little gift. Kyle, let's talk about the political impact of this. This is being touted. To be honest, I read some of the accounts in the Beltway Press Corps, Politico, Washington Post. I think the word breathless applies. You could almost hear the champagne glasses tinkling as they toasted the great success of the Democrats and said, the implication being now this might save the day in November and help them keep the House and the Senate. And of course, it makes Joe Biden now, not too long ago, was thought to be a legislative failure. Now he's FDR again. What do you make of all that?
Yeah, FDR is not the one I saw. It was LBJ, that his Biden's first 2 years are akin to LBJ's. Another line that stuck out to me in the coverage is that Biden is now one of the most legislatively successful presidents of the modern era. And that was in Politico. And I don't quite buy that. I mean, this is clearly a political victory for Biden and for the Democrats. But I guess two things I would argue. One is because you have to remember how much of a climb down this was from the trillions on trillions that President Biden originally wanted as part of the Build Back Better program. And that would have included everything from, government child care program to free community college for certain people. And that is what Joe Manchin, to his credit, I think still said no to and said, we can't do that. Look at these inflation figures. And so I get that they are trying to puff this bill up now as the largest victory since LBJ, passed the Medicare bill. But I think you also have to compare it to what they originally proposed. And as far as the short-term political impact goes, I think that voters are much more motivated by the economic situation, the inflation figures. We're going to get a new inflation figure here shortly. And when they go to the polls, I think they will not be thinking, President Biden passed this bill called the Inflation Act, and that's really going to take care of the situation. I think they're going to be still thinking about the prices at the grocery store that they paid last month. And so I think if the Democrats think this is going to save them in November, I think they're probably wrong about that.
Kim, is there any chance this fails in the House this week? You have those, I don't know how many, 15 of the 23 Democrats who were endorsed by the Chamber of Commerce in 2020, helping Nancy Pelosi keep her majority. Any chance that they will go with the chamber which has opposed this bill, or are they going to salute Speaker Pelosi and sign up for more?
I would say salute and salute hard. That's my view at this moment. They sense this moment and all the headlines out there saying that this is such a success for Joe Biden. And they've also seen what happened to Joe Manchin and to Kyrsten Sinema, at least over the past 18 months. They're now being lauded as heroes for the party and sensible and sane and wonderful, as you heard Chuck Schumer say, but they were pilloried while they were standing in the way of this. There was an attempt at the very end of the vote-a-rama that went into this in the Senate where Republicans were trying to modify the bill. There was only one change in the end. It had to do with how many companies were hit by this corporate minimum tax. There was a fear that it was going to, because of the way the language had been written, bleed through and hit some smaller and medium-sized businesses that are owned by larger companies. So there was a change that would shield them from that kind of tax attack. Sinema went along with this, and originally Republicans tried to pay for that by extending this state and local tax deduction issue that has so riled House Democrats. The goal was to therefore make it harder on them to vote for the bill. But Democrats were wise to it in the Senate. They came up with a different way of paying for it. They voted over Republicans to go that way instead. So there isn't any poison pill in there in terms of SALT. And while you had a number of House members who said they'd never vote for reconciliation unless there was a fix to this SALT provision, they have gone quiet because, again, they know that the party is seeing this as a big victory. I suppose it's possible, but for now, the House is due to come back on Friday, and I see this, Paul, as just being a jump. How high do you want me to jump? And they'll vote it through pretty quick.
Right, and then the question becomes, how does it play in the midterms? And that's hard to determine right now. Maybe it motivates Democrats to come out more. Maybe it doesn't. I don't know. It probably won't have the impact of Obamacare in 2010 because that was so much more affected health care of everybody in some fashion. The tax issue, the IRS issue, the health drug innovation issue, and energy price issue will be play for the Republicans this year. One other thing, Kyle, I want to ask you about the permitting. Kim mentioned she didn't think that would happen the way that Manchin wants it to happen now that he's given up his leverage with Democrats and particularly progressives to change permitting in a way that would allow faster clearance of environmental reviews under the National Environmental Policy Act and other laws. What do you think? Is that a dead letter, or will they just put together some face-saving thing like they call permitting reform, or is this going to be real?
Well, I think that's the question because it's not even clear what Manchin wants. There's this one-page bullet points floating around of permitting ideas, and some of them are so nebulous that it's hard to even understand what exactly he would put into the legislative text to make that happen. So maybe I'm a little less skeptical than Kim that he will get something in this bill, but I think the most likely option is as you say, some sort of face-saving provision that nibbles around the margins of this problem without really fixing it in a wholesale way. And I would point to an op-ed we had recently co-written by former White House counsel C. Boyden Gray with some real ideas of what changes to permitting would look like. And one of them that he points out is he could have a reform bill that changes who has the standing to sue when agencies approve projects for pipelines or roads or bridges. And what he says, these op-ed writers suggest, is that they narrow that so it's only people can sue if they have a real concrete injury, which is what the courts are supposed to adjudicate. So if there's a dam proposed or something like that, and there's a farmer nearby whose fields would be at increased rates of flooding because of the dam, something like that is a real injury. But you could change the law so that if there's a dam proposed in Maine, you don't have, a green group from California coming in and suing with no real connection to the project at issue. But I am skeptical that there's going to be anything more substantive like this because, in part, it seems like Manchin's Democratic colleagues have no interest in it. On Thursday, there was a vote under the Congressional Review Act, which allows Congress to overturn administrative regulations. And the Biden administration has been reversing some of President Trump's permitting reforms. And that passed in the Senate. It was a free vote in the Senate because it's not going to pass the House probably, and it's not going to get signed into law by President Biden. So you'd think there would be some Democratic senators in good faith who would say, okay, we'll vote for this permitting thing, Joe. We'll come along with you. But he was the only Democrat who did. And so I am skeptical that the kind of substantive stuff he seems to want is going to make it past this Democratic Congress.
I have to agree with you, both of you, on this point. It's hard to see any really substantive permitting reforms come through, notwithstanding the promises that Joe Manchin touted. All right. Thank you both. Nice to be with you. And thank you all for listening, everybody. We are back every day. Email us at pwpodcast@wsj.com with a question or comment. Thank you very much for listening. Hope you'll be with us tomorrow.